just to kind of totally starting from scratch, I'll just create a new project. I have that template loaded, so it'll load up all my files. But you know, I could even just delete these to really start from scratch. So we could just make folders here, and might just make main comps is going to be one. And if you go up to new composition, that's the new first starting point. If you need to change that, like I realize I made this really long, I don't need it to be that long, so I hit Control K. I'll make it just 10 seconds. And I guess the first thing I was going to show was, like I said, was like kind of a flying arrow sort of thing in the trim paths. I think that makes most sense. Like if I were to, we can make a solid here by going up to layer, new, create a solid. And actually that'll bring me into some of these effects over here. Like if we go up to effect, we have all these different categories. And we talked about some of these, like, I think there were some of the distort ones we looked at and some of the blurs and things like that. But there's also one called generate. And that can give you a way to kind of help design things inside of After Effects. So there's in here like a gradient. Used to not be able to make shapes with gradients, so they had this effect to make a gradient. It gives you like your color and a start point. And so, but that's a way you could actually animate the positions of these if you wanted. So you could go down here, say, move those. I'm not saying I would recommend this, but almost all of this stuff is keyframeable. And if you just change the color, then you could maybe have, this is actually kind of a helpful thing, especially when it's used really subtly, because a lot of motion graphics is kind of about like a movement of light and, so even having something like that, well, I guess I animated the color, not the light. So you could do that, or you could easily do the same. There's a bunch of different ways. We don't have to do that. We could maybe scale the whole thing up and just rotate it. But you could see nothing happens there. And that's because the way that this is generating the effect is on, kind of in the point space. So some of these are a little bit odd like that. And if you have some weirdness, you might just have to work through that. But something else that I'm going to hit Control Y to make a new solid. We go back to that effect generate layer. There's grid. And I'm going to use this as just kind of a way for us to simulate like a map or something. So we could just say maybe these are streets of a map. And we wanted to, maybe we want to get from here to here or something. And so we want to make a path that shows how to do that. So we can use our pen tool. And again, this thing. So for when you have the pen tool selected, you probably don't need a fill on that. Stuff is coming off over here. So I've just got my pen tool. With no things selected, I could click and start to make paths on here. And you can see that it actually added the fill. So if I twirl that down, you could see that there's just an actual layer on here. And we can even you can delete it, you can select it and delete it, or you can just turn it off, the eyeball. And so this is our path now. I'll just, and if we select this, you can use your tool here to select around it if you have paths selected, or you can just kind of click on a point to move that around if you need to. Under here is all your, vertex. So if we wanted it to be curved, we could do that, just like you would with any other pen tool. So let's say here, we could just position the points, or I'm going to go ahead and just delete this. And I'm hitting G to get to pen. And it kind of cycles through all these different, plus, minus vertex. And of course, Shift will keep you, constrained to 90 degrees. So let's just say we want to do that. Again, we could, I don't know why it's doing that. Ah, there's Colton. Colton, we just showed off your California ski-bin video.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Thanks for showing it off. That that was a ton of fun to do. Yeah. And a tribute to Kitty Caskey. She's awesome.
Nice. So yeah, we're just kind of right now going through kind of like a fake, sort of map scenario. We made these two, used a grid to create this background and, basically saying, let's go from the pink to the orange. And so from here, we could use scale on this shape layer. And this could also be, if you didn't want to use a star, we could actually just go in and you twirl it down and add it to this layer. Just add an ellipse instead. And position it over there. Or you could just make a new one. But for right now, what I wanted to do was animate the size of this and basically animate, grow the pink star, have the pink line draw on, and then grow the orange star. So I'm going to twirl these down to see the star. And that has, some things that we can animate, but it's a little bit weird because it's a star, so it has an inside and outside radius. But we could also just do the transform right there. So that's what I'll do. And I'm just going to go from 0. I'll make a keyframe. Go down maybe however fast you want it to be, but I tend to work in 10 frame increments, so I'll just go hit shift and page down to go 10. And then just type in 100. And I can actually just copy and paste that down to here to do the same thing for this star. And I might scale to make sure I'm on the right one and realize I'm not. So twirl this down. Scrubby, check it. Okay, undo, paste. So if we kind of scrub through this, we see they're both scaling up at the same time now. Okay. This is where the naming really helps. Maybe even a little bit of color labeling. And then on the route, we want to use the trim paths to have that reveal. Something like this, there might be other ways to reveal it too, but for a path, you just go to twirl it down and add this trim paths. And if I solo this so that we can see it a little bit better, we have these parameters to have it draw on and off. And so we can see there which one we actually want to animate. If you've already done it, it's obvious. You can also just switch it, the direction of the path, reverse that way. So if it's kind of confusing and it makes more sense to have it animate with a certain parameter. So I'll do the same thing, hit a keyframe there, go down, actually that 98, so I'm not all the way, I got that little nub. Go down and here. And now I've got, so all three of these things happening at once, and I just have to now sequence them. And the thing about working in tens that's nice is I can go down and just move, I know I can move this down 10 frames, and then I can move that down 10. And if I go play this back, we've got our map drawing on. Obviously, that route is way too fast. So I'll use Alt Shift and the arrow key, or just even drag it. And then just go here. And once you're at that keyframe, you can use the bracket key to just set that. And if we shift this to play it back, and you've got your route. Now, if you had tricky stuff like curves in there or something in your look, there's actually some ways to add that really easily. For example, you can just put this round corners on, and it'll curve those up. And it still functions the same way. Well, that was kind of weird, actually. I don't know. Maybe because it might be an order thing here, where if I put that on the other, something still seems weird there. I guess not. And we use this a lot for the water stuff too. There's also things here where maybe not round corners, but the zigzag to get the water ripples that you saw. And you can change that to smooth. And again, I think it's trimming, it's zigzagging the trimmed path in this place. So that's why it feels like it's scaling. It's kind of stretching. But if we put that before here, you reveal it that way. And if you needed to even wiggle your path, there's ways to do that too. So you can actually have it distort the path itself. And it'll do it a certain amount of time. So maybe for some of our power clients, you're trying to do something along, show that maybe a power line is now active or some kind of transmission thing. Again, probably want to do the wiggle before the trim paths. But it's all, some of that, it's built in. It does a certain amount of wiggles per second. So there's animation kind of built into some of these things, especially like these generate features and functions that I was showing before. And I'd say it's best to try and use that kind of stuff as much as you can, because it's, so to speak, free. You don't really have to do much, and you can just change maybe how much you want it to happen. If you want it to be a little bit more frantic, you can just change it to 10 wiggles per second. And if any of you are into web programming or stuff like that, it kind of starts to feel almost more like programming. Okay, anybody have questions so far? I'm going to take off our wiggle paths and our zigzag. So I want to show how we would now, I said, if we wanted to have an arrow, because that's what we really do a lot, with road kind of stuff. you know, it's like we've got a Google map or something. We need to show that this route is now gonna, you know, I think maybe do a U-turn here or something like that. Then, you know, it's gonna go up that way. So it's kind of, they always want to see the direction of traffic, which means you need to put an arrow in there somewhere. And I mean, an easy way to do it, that if you don't really need it to be an arrow and you just need like a head to the line, kind of, you can sort of use like a second one of these and make it a thicker stroke. And then in your trim paths, you actually, instead of, you put this same key, this copy the same keyframes into your end, just a couple of frames offset, and now you have like a little dash. And so the length of your dash is the difference of how much space you have there. So you can kind of do it that way, where you just kind of have this nice little, you know, it's not an arrow, but at least it kind of tells you where the front of it is. And maybe if you use like some of these round caps and get it a little bit closer, kind of reminds me of that little turtle in that old, anybody ever used that old logo programming language? Same thing here though. If you wanted then this path though to end or show it's already been there, you would just copy and paste that into here. And now that one will also write off. But so if they actually want an arrowhead though, it gets to be a little bit trickier, because now you have to you can either, there's a couple, you basically have to have something follow the position of the path. So if we were to say, let's just make a triangle to be an arrowhead. I actually want this. We'll use the color picker to make it the same. And so we could, theoretically, if it was a simple path like this, just do the keyframes in the rotations, but that's going to get to be kind of a pain. So another thing you can do is actually copy and paste the path itself into the position. And so what we would do here is grab the route and select our path. So we have this selected now. And I'm just going to hit Control-C to copy that. And then up here in the shape layer, I'll name that the arrow. You select position, and I'm going to line this. Well, I'll just do it at the front here. If you paste it, hit Control-V to paste, it puts it in there for you. Now it did it in reverse, so what we can do is select them all, right click, and there's something, you right click on it, keyframe assistance, time reverse, and now it will reverse, and now it's going this way. So but you still have to do a little bit of work to get it to line up just right. So there's another feature in here called auto orientation. I actually don't know how you maybe bring it up. Always hit A. Okay, quick key for it. But oh, I guess it's if you right click the layer and go to transform auto orient. Oh wait, okay. You bring up this, you can click orient along path. That means that it will, now it's turning on its own. So if we change the rotation needed to go that direction, so I'm just going to put in 90. We're kind of getting somewhere now, and it's sort of more of a timing thing than anything. So if we go to our endpoint here and move this to our endpoint, I'm going to hit U to see the keyframes. Here's where it starts and here's where it ends. When you paste the position, it makes these weird keyframes that like they're not, they don't look like the normal ones. They're little round ones. And this is called a roving keyframe, and it sort of automatically figures out the timing between the two endpoints. So if you pull just one of them, you can see that it kind of, the other two stretch with it. So now we would go here and just make sure that those two are aligned. And we still have a little bit of an issue because our anchor point, the shape is just not right on the anchor point. So you can see the anchor point is right on the end of that point. So we would just maybe go in here and use our anchor point adjustment, not that one, to get that right on the center. Actually, just a little bit. And this could also be like a vector layer or anything else. And now if we play it, they're in sync. And combined with the other things, but now our arrow, we just have layer order issue. In this, if they decide, oh, that's not, we don't want it pink or we want it bigger, like this is still, you could just make that a little bit bigger. And that would work too, also, if, now it would not work quite, if you use some of those rounded corners, like you could see it's going to get off a little bit depending on how much you round it. You can get away with a little bit. So some of it's kind of just balancing the two. Could also probably keep your zigzags and whatnot in there. Oh, okay. Yeah, so you can go to arrow. If you either hit Control Alt O, it brings auto orientation up, or if you go to layer transform, it's auto orient at the bottom of that.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah. And that it will work though, so it won't take the rounded corners, but let's say we just had like, something more like this. Let's take our arrow here. And we want to put it in this one. I'm just going to hit U to get that up. I'll remove those. Hit UU to twirl that down. Copy that. Paste it. And it's following, if I change this after the fact, it won't, the keyframes are already there. So I'd have to go copy and paste again if the path changed. But it is following the Bezier curves. And then if you did the same thing and just add your trim paths to this, and you would probably just do that, and then go to the very end. And now it's all together. Now that you have that, and because these are roving, you could actually also just grab this if you need both of them together, if you needed it to be a lot slower. Okay, now the next thing people are going to ask is like, but let's say we needed to stop halfway in the middle. That's where it gets weird. And you probably need to do something else where you actually bring that into a new comp and then like freeze frame it. and use some time different techniques to control that. So I feel like that might be a step too far, but I just wanted to point that out. I feel like that's also a good pause point. Does anybody have any questions or anything else about that? Oh, the other thing I was going to show in the route thing, that's kind of, what we said, how I said those extra little kind of layers. If you were to duplicate this one, this is that offset paths, and it gives you kind of, it just does exactly that. So if you can kind of get something maybe a little bit different, or maybe this is actually maybe one where you don't want to stroke that. Maybe you want to fill that after the fact, and you can still make that transparent to sort of get like a highlighted, maybe like a corridor of a workspace or something, or easy way to you've got your like main corridor, and then here's like the study area or something like that. I use offset paths a lot for that. And look, that's totally flexible too. If they decide they only want to show 5 miles, great. Or you could even stack them and say, here's like the 5 mile radius one, offset that a little bit more, and it's all kind of built in. And you can even turn off the original one if you maybe don't even need that. It's just kind of your initial sort of thing to follow. Let's see. Okay. That's where, especially with the in this too, if you were to do something kind of like drawing on just like a square, there were some of those examples. We would use a trim path there probably too. But then you can also, once it's on here, you have this other control, offset. So you have 0 to 100, but then you can offset just that little bit. So you can just animate that to just go around and around. And a lot of times that's combined with maybe offset. And I think if you do it this way, yeah, now your offset is going to kind of, if you didn't have this one on, you can see how these two start to kind of maybe balance each other. And a lot of times one will be maybe coming around one direction while you have the other going the other, just to almost like outline whatever shape isn't quite there. So it's a good way to add like a little bit of movement. And then a lot of times, like for maybe just glowy effects, even where if you were to like blur that and put a shape over this, then you kind of have like a little highlight underneath or something like that. It's going to show a couple of other of those generation effects, because there's some cool stuff in here too. Very motion graphic-y, and would definitely be in the realm of making stuff inside here. So I'm actually going to use some text. And if we go into generate, you can also navigate these through, there's a window, effects and presets. And once you get to know them, you can start to just type stuff in. And you can also navigate this way. So I think it might be easier to see though. So a couple of the big ones that I use a lot. Okay, so light rays is one that was like super, I don't even know how, it's just very motion graphic-y. And there's a plugin called Shine that you would have seen in every like video trailer that's ever been created. Um, some of these you can see it's getting cropped off, so a lot of these you actually need to apply to an adjustment layer. I'm going to remove that, and you can just go to layer, new adjustment layer. So now this will, just like Photoshop, apply it to everything below. So I'll put light rays, just drag it right onto there. And you can, wow, that's really not working well for me. Okay. Let's see. So this is where maybe not, we didn't need to actually use the adjustment layer. You actually have to pre-comp it. So if I right click and go to pre-compose, or hit Control Shift C, or go up here, if you right click and go pre-compose. And really, that's kind of a difficult way to do this. I'm just going to call this type. And what we need to do is drag this into its own comp so that it has the border is all the way to the edges. And now if we put this on here, you can see you get this light effect. And the controls are over here. And you could change the color of it and the color from source. So if we change that, add, you could change the color. And you get, I don't even know how to describe it really, but it's like a warping kind of effect and, kind of a light driven sort of thing. You change the shape on it to square. And so the way you animate this would be like you animate this center, maybe from here, and just drag it across. And so you get like kind of a lot of these things work best almost like really fast. But if we took it from there, there's different modes too, like if we needed to. So that's one that kind of gets used a lot. The radius will give you a little bit different look. Let's see. Okay, so then on the same, actually, I'm gonna make this. A lot of that stuff doesn't work with pure white, and it needs like some color. So it's a little bit cleaner and easier to see what's going on there. And it might even kind of like what we were saying before, maybe this is actually a lot of times this is something where you kind of put it behind and you put like another layer on top, or there's a lot of like add transfer modes that people use in combination with blurs to get that kind of like just like a more cinematic look, I guess. Okay, another thing that, what was I going to say? Another generation effect under here. X that out. I can go back. Generate is called radio waves, and if you drag that on there, and you just scrub down the timeline, it just automatically creates like what you would see at like a antenna beacon kind of thing and your typical radio. And in here, it's kind of like before where you have frequency and it tells you how many. There's a lifespan, so that means they won't last as long. They kind of fade out. They'll only stop there, or if you need them, you can get some wacky stuff in here with the like orientation. You can change the thickness of the start and the end. So you can get also kind of interesting effects from this too. And maybe you don't want it to grow. So you might pre-compose something like this altogether and then use only like this part. You might make it a lot longer than your timeline so that you have, you can use it at this point. And that might even be just like a background or something. You can change your color in there. There's other like ways that it will change the stroke. You can change to image contours, I think, which is really cool. This one does mask, I think. So if we just draw a mask and then select it, yeah, now we have to assign it. I think we also have to make it none here. Okay. I guess not. But that can be really interesting. Another thing that's kind of like that is, so there's some of these where scribble, where this will fill in your mask, and I think this is also animated. So if you want like kind of a scribbly effect to anything, you can just kind of add it on there. Right on is what you used to use for before they had trim paths. And it was like you actually animated this point. It was kind of a pain. Vegas is something that's like, I don't know, it's just like lines. I think that's yeah, I think it would basically be like a sign. You can kind of see on the edge. It's like a marquee sign, kind of. And then I think you can animate those maybe. Yeah. So use that, and you could make kind of like a little sign if you needed to simulate that. So a lot of these are good for simulation kind of things. There's if you need to make lightsabers, you can use beam. And this is also good for like blasters, I guess, if you need to shoot things. But you can have this is actually quite powerful. And I used to use this for leader lines a lot because you have this thickness control. And you can almost get like a 3D, like fake 3D perspective with it. And so, I guess I'm not really a Star Wars guy, to be honest. I don't know whose color is who. Might be making the dark side here, but I saw old tutorials about how people would actually like use then footage to track that, and then this is an effect to, cover up their PVC pipes or broomsticks or whatever they were actually using. um, Yeah, and then there's another one before there were gradients. There's like this thing, like 4-color gradient. That's a nice way to make like some nice subtle backgrounds. It gives you these 4 points, gives you these like crazy colors, but it can actually be super nice if you are in the same family and just looking to create like a nice, on brand background. You can move the points around to be maybe whatever you want. Sometimes it's nice to even change up like how they're laid out. So maybe I'd have like a top light kind of thing. You have like a really quick background now. And if we were to even do something like this, like take our type, quickly scale it negative, and turn the opacity down. And now like we've got a reflection automatically. And if we just parent them together. And now, like if we did our type, if we went in here and did our animation in here, let's say we want to animate it going down, like coming up from the top. We actually can just do this over here. I don't use this technique a lot, but Jake just masks his, and it'll go underneath there then. So if we go back to our main one now and play this down, you get this like really cool, reflective kind of thing. So yeah, let's see, is there anything else? There's a lot of other kind of corny ones in here. Only got a couple minutes left, so I'll open it up to questions real quick since we're almost at time. I guess the other effects are kind of in this distort area where you might add stuff like you use like turbulent displace a lot, and that would, can you mask the shadow? Yes, yeah, you could easily just kind of grab that in your tool here. Oops, I grabbed the wrong one. And that might be where you want to. And now if I could mask it and I could feather it. And then you might even want to add like to this top one, maybe even a little shadow or something. You might, multiply it. And a lot of times I'll actually go, kind of just squish it down like that. It doesn't take a lot actually to give it, just a little bit more depth. You might want to blow it or something. It does, right? It pretty much is. And then let's say, yeah, sure, no problem. So yeah, I would to render this, I would go now. I always just hit Control M. Yeah, you got it. Let's see. I'm just gonna save it to my desktop for now.